Today on Star Trek Revisited, we are rewatching the classic Star Trek original series episode, Arena, where we are going to meet the Gorn for what used to be the first time. Let's get straight into it. This episode starts with, as usual, another remastered shot of the Enterprise over a yellowy-looking planet, which in this instance is called Cestus III. In the transporter room, we have Kirk chatting with McCoy and a landing party that is getting ready to beam down to the surface at the invitation of Commodore Travers, who is presumably the commanding officer of this base. Part of the landing party is Spock, who is preparing his tricorder, and in the background we see three members of the Enterprise's tactical expert team, Lieutenant Kelowitz, who we have seen before in the Galileo 7, Mr. Lang, and Mr. O'Herlihy. At the transporter, we have Scotty getting ready to beam our landing party down, and beam down they do. And they're all very, very excited about this, as the Commodore Travers's hospitality is legendary around Starfleet command circles. Down they go to the planet, very, very eager and keen, and as they materialize, they are greeted by a sight that they were not expecting, given the friendly communications that they have received up to this point. They look around and it's clear that Cestus III has suffered a catastrophic attack, and Kirk immediately signals the Enterprise and says Cestus III has been destroyed. And so ends our opening teaser. After the opening titles, we see this episode's title, which is Arena. And the surroundings we have here are very, very interesting indeed. It's not quite like anything that we have seen in a Star Trek episode before. We are in what looks to be like a fortress or a castle of some sort, and the terrain is very sandy or gravelly, to say the least, and in the background are some hills and a skyline. Now, this skyline and the hills beyond the structure that they are in have certainly been remastered from the original unaltered version of this episode, and it looks all the better for it. Now, our intrepid landing party immediately are on high alert. They draw their phasers and they go for cover. You'll note that in this occasion, we can see Kirk has a phaser number 1 and the tactical team have phaser number 2 in hand. What's interesting about the presence of these tactical officers, Lang, O'Herlihy, and Kelowitz, is that they are all wearing different colors. We have O'Herlihy in red for security or engineering usually. We have Lang in command or operations yellow. And we have Kelowitz in science or medical blue, which is another indication that they hadn't quite come to terms with what the colors meant for the uniforms in this series as yet. Kirk instructs Lang and Kelowitz to scout out in different directions and try and see what has gone on here, while O'Herlihy sticks with our big three, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, and they go to investigate further. Spock with his trusty tricorder, and he, along with McCoy, carrying the Type 1 phasers. They quickly come across a survivor of Cestus III who is wearing a Starfleet uniform with the different emblem on the chest. It's not the familiar Delta that we see on the Enterprise, and this is something we've come to get used to in the original series. This fella is in a bad way, and he communicates with them that they weren't expecting any trouble at all. It came as a complete surprise, the attack on them, as there's nothing anybody could possibly want from them here on Cestus III. Spock, meanwhile, detects life forms on his tricorder, and he points out to Kirk where he believes them to be. Kirk then orders poor O'Herlihy to go and get a closer look, and for a tactical officer, he's not very tactical here because he basically stands up and puts himself in full view. And before he can get out the words, "Captain, he gets vaporized. And it's bye-bye O'Herlihy. And Kirk has lost another man. They then get bombarded with an attack and they have to take cover. So Kirk signals the Enterprise immediately to beam them up fast. Sulu on the bridge at his station at the helm is in command of the Enterprise at this time. Leslie is at the engineering station. Sulu informs the landing party that they have also come under attack in orbit and they cannot drop their security shields to beam them back up. Sulu fires phasers at the enemy ship, and this is a disappointment to me in this remastered episode, in that quite often in the unaltered versions of episodes before the remastering, we wouldn't see an enemy ship. We might get a little orange blob on the view screen, but when the episodes came to be remastered, that was corrected and we got ships in all their glory with brand new effects. Here, we don't get a look at all at what will turn out to be the Gorn ship. Kirk, as ever and predictably, instructs Sulu, do whatever you have to do, but protect my ship. Don't worry about us. And this is a mark of a Starship commander. He closes the channel and confers with Spock, and he expresses his concern that he should be up there in command of the Enterprise. It's his ship. Spock reassures him that Sulu is an experienced combat officer, as they have to take further cover and retreat as a bombardment from the distance continues. I do have to note here that the drama of this scene is only amplified by the excellent music on the score of this episode, so we'll take particular note at the end of the episode who helmed the score for this episode. As they take cover, Kirk instructs Lang and Kelowitz to flank out and try and get a better vantage point for what is going on, get them into better positions. Kirk, meanwhile, hatches a plan to fight back, and he confers with Spock and asks him, do you remember the location of the armory? And they agree that it is so many meters in that direction, and Kirk makes a break for it, even though he'll be very, very exposed, and here he goes across the open terrain, and quite frankly, he's lucky that he isn't shot here. But what we do get is some classic Kirk dropping and rolling and scrambling for cover, and it's classic William Shatner, and I love it. It's a miracle he doesn't get his shirt torn in this moment. We then get another signal from the Enterprise with Sulu confirming to Kirk that the phaser attack on the enemy ship has had no effect. The attack is still going on, and he indeed does think that they will have to take evasive action. Kirk instructs Sulu to try photon torpedoes before doing that. And on the bridge, as Sulu gets ready to fire those photon torpedoes, we can see a guest navigator sitting next to Sulu. Now, if he looks very familiar, then he should be for a couple of reasons. Now, this is a guy called Sean Kenny, who in this instance is playing Navigation Officer DePaul, Mr. DePaul. He is also the same actor who played the disabled Captain Christopher Pike in The Chair in the two-part of The Menagerie. And the reason he should look familiar is not only because of that, but without all of that makeup on, he is really a very, very close likeness for the late Jeffrey Hunter. He really does look quite like him. So he was a really good choice to play that role, I'm sure you'll agree. This is one of two appearances that we'll see of Sean Kenny playing Mr. DePaul in Season 1. Torpedoes are fired, and glorious close-up effect of the torpedoes being launched from the Enterprise. And Kirk communicates to Sulu as it's reported that it's ineffective. Again, get my ship out of here. And Sulu reluctantly agrees, and he takes the Enterprise out of orbit. Kirk, meanwhile, has managed to find his way into the armory. And Spock, watching from a distance, realizes that he's going to need to get to the captain's position because there's a threat that the captain might get more exposed to the aliens who are attacking. He manages to reach them, and Kirk, by this point in time, has armed himself with what looks like a mini cannon with balls that get put into it that come out of like a little shoebox or something of that nature. There's these little blue balls that are projectiles that go into the cannon. While they're preparing to fire this, Spock's tricorder starts smoking, and he says in astonishment, they've locked onto my tricorder, and he throws it away, and he marvels at the ingenious nature that which their opponents have locked onto it and caused it to overload. Quite the ingenious approach. The tricorder explodes, and then Kirk and Spock get ready to fire this weapon. And at that moment, Kirk shouts for Lang, but Lang doesn't appear, Kelowitz does, and he reports that they got Lang, sir. Kirk, meanwhile, asks for Kelowitz's tactical expertise here and says, where should we fire, basically? Where do you think our enemy is? Evaluation, Mr. Kelowitz. Kelowitz says, if I were them, I would be in that high ground to the right. So Kirk aims for there, and he fires the weapon, And there's a big explosion in that area, which is quite marvelous and creates a little bit of a rainbow effect, actually, as you can see in this screenshot. Following the detonation, Kirk's communicator signals, and it's Sulu. The Enterprise is back in orbit, having informed the landing party that the enemy ship has engaged their transporters and beamed up their landing party, and they're now headed away from Cestus 3. Kirk instructs for the landing party to be beamed aboard. Next scene, we cut to sickbay, where the injured officer from Cestus 3 is being questioned by Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. He's in a bad way. He's got a lot of scarring and burning on his face. And he reiterates the point that they had nothing of value. They had no real expectation of being attacked. And he's very upset, quite naturally, because of this, because he is the lone survivor from Cestus 3. He's a very, very lucky person, but he clearly is going to have survivor's guilt and is going to need intense therapy to process this as he moves forward. It's nice to see, though, that he didn't pass away, as is quite often the case with characters like this who are there to tell a story and then are no longer needed. So it's good to see this guy surviving. We then cut to Kirk's quarters, where Kirk and Spock are debating exactly what has happened here. They come to the conclusion, and this is very strongly indicated from Kirk, that everything they've seen so far is leading up to an inevitable invasion. And Spock says to him, if that is the case, then you have one course of action here. You must ensure that the enemy vessel does not reach its home base. And he's right. And this gives me vibes of Balance of Terror, where the same principle applied, where they had to engage and attack the Romulan vessel. So there is some good consistency here. Kirk signals to the whole ship and tells them that they are going in pursuit of the enemy vessel and to go to battle stations, and this is no drill. Repeat, this is no drill. And the tension mounts again. We cut to the Enterprise in hot pursuit of, well, nothing, according to this screenshot. And again, this is one of the major thumbs down for me in this particular remastered episode, in that we don't really get a view of the Gorn ship. Not yet, anyway. It would have been nice to see something here. And we go through a scene here of chase cat and mouse, where the Enterprise increases its warp velocity and the enemy ship responds in kind by increasing their own speed to maintain the distance. All of this results in Scotty in particular being very, very concerned about his poor bairns. Not that he refers to them as that in this episode, but that will certainly come. But Scotty is extremely concerned about sustaining a high warp speed for this hot pursuit. Spock actually confirms this and said a sustained warp 7 speed will be risky, but they proceed nevertheless, and Kirk is sticking to his guns. Meanwhile, Sulu notices that the alien ship has come to a dead stop, and Kirk here gets a little bit cocky, which is a thumbs down for me, because why doesn't he question this more? He basically reacts in such a way that, yes, we've got him, then we've got him. He's very, very uber confident here, and he goes about instructing them to be ready to close in and go in for the kill. And as they do so, something, an invisible force, stops the Enterprise dead in its tracks, and we get this reaction of them decelerating out of warp and everyone having to cling on for dear life to something on the bridge to stop themselves from falling over. Now, this is the first time on the view screen that we get a very distant shot of what turns out to be the Gorn vessel, and we can barely make it out. And I don't know if this would be consistent with Gorn vessels that we've seen in other iterations of Star Trek. I can't really get a good enough look at it to make an assessment. So if any of you think it looks similar, do let me know in the comments. Another thumbs down from me here is Kirk says to DePaul and to Sulu, "Warp 8, have you lost your mind?" And it should be very, very obvious to Kirk that this is nothing that Sulu and DePaul have done. And they all quickly realize, as Kirk confers with Scotty and Leslie here that we can see, that the Enterprise has been stopped in its tracks and is now being held in place by some sort of unseen force, and they cannot move. And before they get any chance at all to debate this mystery any further, a mysterious coloured image appears on the main view screen, and a voice identifies these beings as the Metrons. We are the Metrons. And they have said that they have observed the dispute and the pursuit of the Enterprise and the Gorn across their territory, and they cannot accept this. It is clear that you are uncivilized and dangerous creatures. Therefore, we will transport you, Captain Kirk, and the captain of the Gorn ship to an environment where we will settle this with a contest. And Kirk tries to communicate with them, but to no avail. And a few moments later, Kirk disappears from the bridge just like that, much like he did in the Square of Gothos. Now, they should be used to this by now, but clearly they're not, because Uhura, in what, to me, from what we know of her character so far, is quite out of character, she actually screams, and it's actually quite irritating that she screams. Spock, coolly and calmly, comes over to the command position and raises an eyebrow. Meanwhile, we cut to a planet surface, and we're in the outdoors again. We are at Vasquez Rocks for probably the most famous time, and we see the Gorn for the very first time. And what can you say about the costume for this particular Star Trek alien? Boy, is it really 60s, as we see Kirk is also here, and he is appraising his opponent, and he has a recording device on a belt which has been placed on his uniform, and they face off with each other in this very, very epic shot of Vasquez Rocks behind them. Now, we get a little bit of a captain's log or a voiceover from Kirk here saying that he's got an instinctive revulsion to reptiles, and this is the form in which his opponent is presented. He's a reptilian form who appears to be quite stronger than he will be, but less agile, which is an accurate assessment. And there's also an assessment of inconsistency in terms of how we would come to know the Gorn in later iterations of Star Trek. And that's a thumbs down for me. That is a canon inconsistency. Unless this particular Gorn, if you want to be clever about it, is an older Gorn and the captains don't usually go on away missions, and older Gorns are more frail and have slowed down a bit. I do not know. Kirk relays in his voiceover that the Metron, in his monologue to him before he'd been transported, had informed each of them that there would be materials to furnish weapons on the planet's surface for their engagement. And importantly, something I didn't mention so far, is that the winner takes all, including, most importantly, survival. The losing captain will be killed and his ship will be destroyed. And the battle commences. The Gorn goes for a big heavy branch which he snaps from the tree with ease, and Kirk tries to do the same. And as he returns to face the Gorn, he realizes that no, this branch ain't going to cut it at all. And he tries to have a go at the Gorn. And as was suspected, he proves that he is much quicker, because the Gorn swings for him and Kirk easily ducks out of the way, and he gives him a Kirk chop to the back. Classic Shatner fight sequence going on here. Now, the mistake Kirk makes here is he tries to start wrestling with this creature, and this is not a good idea at all, because he's starting to get squashed, and Kirk scratches at the Gorn's head and realizes that the best form of defense here will be to run away, and he does that. He runs up the rocks, and he finds a small rock which he decides to pick up, and you can see that this is a very, very heavy rock because he's struggling to lift it, and he decides as he struggles to lift this over his head that he's going to propel this towards the Gorn, and he hits them straight in the chest, right on from the front. And it has no effect whatsoever. The Gorn decides to show off here in response, and although he's not fast, as we've said, he is very, very strong. And he picks up this enormous rock, which he propels at Kirk, and Kirk sees it coming just at the right moment and dodges out of the way. And what I really like about this particular scene is that this is actually William Shatner that you're seeing here. This is not a stunt double. And Kirk's done a lot of this so far, I've noticed, in this episode, as he's rolling and scrambling around the dirt on Cestus 3. It was him doing all that, and it's him doing all that again here. Briefly, we cut back to the Enterprise, where Spock and Scotty are conferring by Leslie at the engineering station, and basically acknowledging that, as is often the case in these situations, there's pretty much nothing they can do except wait. They cannot get control of the ship back. They cannot break the tractor lock or whatever is holding them here. It's just not working at all. Meanwhile, on the planet's surface, Kirk has ascended to high ground, and he starts using the recording device that is on his belt, in the hopes that if anyone else falls into this same predicament further down the line, that they might find this and either fare better and or get the message to Starfleet Command. What Kirk doesn't know at this point is that the Gorn, who has a identical recording device, can actually hear every word Kirk is saying, because they're not only are these recording devices, they are also two-way communication devices. But Kirk continues to talk away, and he looks at the brush terrain around him, as I think he describes it, brush and scrub, or words to that effect. And he remembers the fact that the Metron had said that there would be weapons that he could furnish, but as yet he doesn't see anything obvious that could be classed as a weapon, as he picks up and disregards what looks like a large bamboo. Meanwhile, down below, our Gorn friend is slowly preparing a trap. He's got some, I don't know if it's not rope, I don't think, but it's, it is clearly rope disguised as what looks like a thorny twig of some sort. And he's putting this in position around a couple of rocks as a trap for Kirk to trip over if he can lure him into said trap. Meanwhile, Kirk is continuing to explore, and he finds some diamonds and other beautiful and valuable looking stones. And he records again, diamonds, the hardest substance in the known universe. This place is a mineralogist's dream, but I would give this all up in exchange for a hand phaser. He then turns and looks up to a very, very piece of high ground in which there is a very, very large rock, very conveniently placed there. And as the Gorn is still working down below, as Kirk glances down at him, Kirk decides that he's going to climb up to this rock on this cliff edge, this very, very dangerous looking cliff edge, and he's going to try and push the big rock down and onto the Gorn. And he heaves and he pushes and he struggles, and he does succeed in pushing the rock down. And the rock does actually start to approach the Gorn. The Gorn looks up quite... for all the fact that this costume here is very, very unconvincing, this particular still here I find quite compelling. The Gorn actually does look like he's quite surprised here. So the Gorn suit is doing some good acting, or whoever was inside him. And as we get to the end, we'll see that there are a number of actors who were inside this suit, one of which is Billy Blackburn. They're doing a good job, whoever this is. The big rock lands on the Gorn. We can see the Gorn floored by it and the rock on top of him. And Kirk looks happy with his efforts, and he scrambles down the cliffside and runs down towards the Gorn, and he stops in his tracks, though, as the Gorn starts to move again. And Kirk can't quite believe what he's seeing. He cannot believe that the Gorn is so strong. His skin is so resilient that he has been hurt by this, but he has not been defeated by this. And Kirk realizes that he's going to have to run again, and run he does, straight into the Gorn's trap. He trips over the twine, or whatever you want to call it, twists around him, and Kirk is all tied up at this point in time, and he's stuck, he's restrained, and the rock falls on top of him, pinning him down even more. So he's in trouble as the slow Gorn approaches him, but he doesn't need to be fast now because Kirk is pinned down. Now, as the scene or act cuts to an ad break and comes back, we see the Gorn lift the rock off slowly, and this is Kirk's chance. He realizes that speed will be his friend here again, and he jumps up quickly and disentangles himself before the Gorn can attack with his very slow reflexes, and runs off again. Meanwhile, on the Enterprise, Spock is desperately trying to contact the Metrons, and they're getting no response, but he says, "We desperately require a conference. Please respond." And nothing comes back. Meanwhile, Kirk runs around and he spots some further things of interest, some yellow powder on the rock surfaces, which is a sulfuric compound, I believe Spock describes it later on. And again, he's not seeing what he perceives to be any valuable or useful weapons here, but he is seeing these individual components, which we will find out are going to be useful as we go on, as he records this into his log. Meanwhile, back on the Enterprise, the Metrons do contact the Enterprise, and they inform the Enterprise crew that their captain is losing his battle, which, quite frankly, I think is a bit harsh, to be honest. I think it's quite even so far. I mean, yes, Kirk did fall into the Gorn's trap, and he has become a bit compromised by that, but nevertheless, he still has the speed and agility advantage despite all that. So I think it's a bit of an unfair assessment. As the Metrons perceive Kirk to have been losing this battle, though, they react with some compassion here after McCoy just blatantly shouts out, "We appeal to you in the name of civilization." And Spock gives him almost a raised eyebrow at that response, as if to say, "Really, Doctor?" without saying anything. And the Metrons reply, "The way that you've acted today proves that you are not civilized, but we acknowledge that you might have some rituals that you will do to prepare for death, so you can do. We are going to allow you to see what is going on the planet." And the view screen engages, and they see the Gorn for the first time, and they see Kirk limping along the rocks and discovering more materials and compounds and whatnot around the area that he is in. And Kirk gets a little smile on his face at this point, as if something has clicked in his head. And he goes off and he starts to go assembling bits and pieces of things that he's seen so far. He goes and collects a good bit of the bamboo tubing, if that's the right way to describe it. Put some diamonds in it. He gets some of the yellow powder. And Spock has cottoned onto this straight away. He realizes that these are things that Kirk can use to make a weapon to his advantage. And Spock is very appreciative of what's going on here. He's almost enjoying himself. He's like, if only there was some coal. And then the next scene, wouldn't you know, coal appears. And Kirk starts assembling things and putting his contraption together. And whilst he's doing this, the Gorn calls to him on the transmitter. And Kirk says, "Who is this, the Metron?" And it says, "This is your opponent speaking. I've heard every word you have said." He says, "I weary of the chase. Wait for me. I will make it quick." And it's a bit arrogant of the Gorn, isn't it? Assuming that he'll just win. But anyway, Kirk ignores this and he continues with his efforts to make this projectile, basically. It's kind of like a makeshift version of the device that he used in the armory on Cestus 3 earlier on. It's a very, very similar approach to that. And what he's basically doing here is he's making gunpowder with the diamond as a projectile. And it's very, very clever indeed. And he uses once he has everything assembled that he needs inside the tubing, he ignites with the coal a spark using the recording device that has been provided. And he makes fire. Man makes fire as the Gorn comes around the corner and he's approaching him slowly but surely. And Kirk manipulates the flame and blows on it and gets it to burn. And he ignites his weapon and boom, it fires the diamond right into the Gorn's chest, and the Gorn keels over and collapses, and Kirk falls backwards and collapses as well, and the Gorn is defeated. Now Kirk then, after a few moments pause to catch his breath, goes over to finish the Gorn off, and he picks up what looks like a black stake, and he's about to stab the Gorn with it when he gets a look on his face, and he says, no, I won't kill you. And then he shouts up to the Metrons, who are obviously listening, and says, "You hear that? No, I won't kill him." And with that, the Gorn disappears. And a mysterious figure appears nearby. And Kirk says, "Are you a Metron?" And the Metron nods and says, "Yes, does my appearance surprise you, Captain?" Now, I don't know if the Metrons have gender, but I always assumed that this character, this Metron, was meant to be male. However, it is a woman portraying the character here and is dressed in a quite female-looking garb, but it is a male voice that speaks. So they converse, and the Metron relays that they are impressed by Kirk's willingness not to kill, and perhaps they deserve another chance after all. And Kirk then says, "What will happen to the Gorn?" The Metron says, "I sent him back to his ship. If you like, I will destroy him for you." And Kirk says, "No, we learn nothing by that. We can talk." And the Metron says, "You continue to surprise, Captain. We are too advanced to engage with you at this time, but perhaps in a few thousand years, your species shows much promise." And with that, he disappears, and we're back on the Enterprise bridge, and just like that, ping, Kirk reappears, and everything is back to normal. Even his uniform is dirt on his face. The Metrons have given him a little wash and polish before beaming him back to the Enterprise. And everyone stands up and is pleased to see him, and they say, "Are you all right, Captain?" And Kirk says, I don't know. And Sulu pipes up that they are quite some distance from where they ought to be. They are halfway across the galaxy, and he can't explain it. And Kirk just acknowledges it and says, "Mr. Sulu, plot us a course back to Cestus 3. Take us back to where we're supposed to be." And the episode winds up. Kirk and Spock conferring as McCoy smiles, pats Jim on the shoulder, and exits the bridge. And Spock asks, what happened in the end? We didn't see much beyond you detonating your contraption. And Kirk was very surprised that you saw all that and says, indeed we did. And Kirk ends the episode on a note of hope. And he says, we're a very promising species, Mr. Spock, and it's a good feeling on which to end this episode, and I particularly do enjoy that. The episode comes to a close. It is directed by Joseph Pevney. Let's take a look at him and his credits for Star Trek. Now, he's directed quite a few in season 1, Arena, this one, and there are more to come, and quite a few in season 2 as well. Let's look at the guest stars. We've got DeForest Kelley as McCoy, George Takei as Mr. Sulu, James Doohan as Scotty, Nichelle Nichols as Uhura, Jerry Ayres played O'Hurley, Grant Woods as Kelowitz, his second appearance of 3 in season 1. We have Tom Troop as Lieutenant Harold. That is the survivor of Cestus 3, who was transported to the Enterprise sickbay. I was trying desperately to remember his name as I was reciting this, but I couldn't. James Farley playing Lang, Carol Shelleen as the Metron, and Sean Kenny as DePaul. The music was composed and conducted on this occasion by Alexander Courage, and really great music for this episode it was too. Let's take a look at the wider cast list from IMDb. Have we got anything that we haven't accounted for yet? And we can see that there were a number of people who played the Gorn. We had Billy Blackburn, who was our Lieutenant Hadley. We had apparently Ted Cassidy did the voice. Now, Ted Cassidy was Ruck from What a Little Girl's Made Of, and I am reliably informed by a regular commenter on this channel, Tranya, who, and a great name by the way, that Ted Cassidy was also the voice of Baylock, and that actually makes a lot of sense. So he did the voice for the Gorn. We also have Bobby Clark as the Gorn. We have Gary Coombs as the Gorn. So a lot of people got a turn at playing the Gorn in various ways. And the other guest stars we have here are our regular Lieutenant Brent and Lieutenant Leslie as well. The only remaining thing to do now is to score this episode, and this gets a very, very deserved 7.9 on IMDb. I'm going to give this episode an 8, round it up to a full 8. I think it's very, very good. I think it's one of those ones that I've always enjoyed. I do wonder if it feels a little bit tainted now by what we've seen in Strange New Worlds. I'm trying not to let that be the case, and I know that's entirely my decision. And some of you might agree with me on that, some of you might not, but 8 I think is fair for this episode. So there we are. Another one in the bag, and let's wind this up and go to some closing thoughts in the outro. And there we have it, another classic episode in the bag. I've always really enjoyed that one. You can't really get much more classic or much more iconic than Kirk versus the Slow Gorn. It really is a really enjoyable episode. Now, next time we'll be looking at a not so enjoyable episode, which, to be fair, has its moments, but it's a strange one. It's probably one of the low points of season 1 for me, and that is the alternative factor with the man with the funny beard. Not that I want to talk. Anyway, with that said, I'm going to leave this video here. Please do like, share, and subscribe. And I'm going to ask you, as ever, to take care, stay safe, travel well, and above all else, live well and prosper. Bye-bye.